True. Let's go to Karma Green, we steady on the rise. Digging truth from ancient scenes, we open blinded eyes. Rhyme sharp like pirates' lines, we break the bondage tight. Kanji speaking revolution, keep the fire burning. Trumpet drums guide our stride, we march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide, our voices thunder loud. Politics and history, we stitch them in every verse. From Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets, we claim the kanji verse.
Hey, I want to break down how these new UNESCO papers, articles, destroy Metatron. They destroy the Mediterraneanites. They destroy, a lot of the grifters who wanted to deny the blackness of Kemet. They completely destroy the people who wanted to deny the blackness and inter-African affinity of North Africans. They just completely obliterate these grifters. And we're going to break down why. So I want to talk about this new study. These new articles, rather, in the UNESCO papers, the UNESCO Symposium General History of Africa, right? These are the new updated texts, and these particular papers are going to come from volume 9, right? But they have volume 9 through 11 that you definitely should check out. And this article is from the good Dr. Shomarka Keita, right? Dr. Shomarka Keita wrote an article about the genealogical connections of Africa's regions, right? And this was a very, very brilliant article because it exposed how Pan Africanism is actually the truth. Africa is united genealogically. There is not a racial split on the continent. Now, from the recent Nadine Salem et al., analysis, and shout out to London and Trill Black, who did a recent video about this. That was very brilliant, right? Where they kind of exposed the lies, following after our live that we did, of this study trying to promote a restriction, trying to promote a genetic barrier. And many of the Panos, that's the Pan-Africanist in name only, they like to tap dance and act as if there is, a genetic version of the Berlin Conference, as Shomarka put it, and they like to act as if that is definitively true. But the strategy that they did is they looked at these Takakori remains in the Green Sahara, and they found that, they were really closely related to the Fulani, and actually more closely related to West and Eastern Africans than they were to, Eurasians. And then they flipped it and said that this means that the Fulani have, Eurasian ancestry or Eurasian affinity. And then by extension, West and East Africans, who also are related to Takakori and who are also close to Takakori, are only close because of recent Eurasian mixture. They will try their absolute best to promote Hamidicism, to promote their vision of diffusion, because they don't want to connect ancient North Africa to modern so-called Black Africa. And, John Henry Clark said that we should never use the term Black Africa, because then that would imply that there is the existence of a white Africa, right? But this study, the study by Shomarka Keita, as well as the study of Jean-Philippe Gourdin, completely debunked that. When Jean-Philippe Gourdin looked at the ancient Kemetic remains, and he looked at the analysis of leprosy, finding leprosy from the late period of Abu Sir connected to Martinique and Afro-Brazilian populations, as well as West African populations, finding Senegambian strains of tuberculosis within the Middle Kingdom, right? That could show that there was an ancient Saharan population that migrated to Kemet, or, ancient Kemetic populations migrated across the Sahelian waterways into Senegambia. And Gourdin also cited in this paper Busby et al.'s analysis, which shows Happy River Basin genetic affinity autosomally in Gambian and Senegambian populations, right? Promoting this east to west migration. So all of the idiots, shout out to the pseudo killers, shout out to Bobby and Ankh, shout out to, the brother Ngozi, aka Amir, who deny this. They've been completely debunked. This paper even referenced the Pop-affiliator analysis showing genetic affinity between ancient Kemet and Central, Southern, and Western Africans, inter-Africans, right? The paper talked about how the E Haplogroup is a Pan African haplogroup that originated in tropical East Africa. So the paternal lineages of the African continent share a origin in tropical East Africa. And for all the people who like to say the Amazigh aren't black, the Imohag aren't black, these Maghrebian populations, pre-Moors buying, Slavic prostitutes from the Ottomans who weren't black. According to Dr. Shomarka Keita, the E haplotype in North Africa, in the Maghreb, originated in tropical East Africa, which is why some of the Tuareg, some of the Amazigh autosomally are closely related to the Beja populations of East Africa, right? And even when we look at the Tuareg, they have some of the highest ranks of H1 and U6 and a lot of the so-called back migration lineages. And this is what Nadine Salem-Matal and a lot of these Mediterraneanites like to play with. They like to look at, so-called basal Eurasian genes, right? And they like to act as if these genes are completely separate from Africa, when in all actuality, these are likely, out of Africa hub affinities. These are ancient ancestral North African affinities, right? You see them spreading into Europe during the Paleolithic time and even as late as the Mesolithic. If you look at, instances like Lebranaman in ancient Spain, right, who had African affinity, right? So this is just an example of the fact that these individuals like to play games, they like to lie, they like to manipulate, they're fraudulent, right? They're just disgusting with the way that they twist information. And, we use a shout out to these articles. Shout out to, Dr. Gordine and Dr. Shomarka Keita, right? They speak about, again, EM35, and we went over the EM35 subclades like the Nakadan marker, like ECTS693, that originated in Nubia that you see, right, within Western Africa. EV6873 in the same vein, associated with Happy River Basin populations, Sudanic populations, E1B1A or EM2 in Ramses III, which indicates, as we've discussed before, even the conventional model admits that the ancestors of modern, West and Central Africans existed in North Africa in antiquity, right? So you see this, and you see like the spread of the E haplotype, right? In the Holocene, during the Holocene, over 11,000 years ago. You see E1A being an instance of this early east to west migration. So for the idiots who deny an east to west migration, specifically as it relates to ancient Kemet and contemporary Africa, this paper refutes that, and it shows that this was a consistent theme that goes back to the origins of Homo sapiens sapiens, right? Paternalistically, right, in terms of the uniparental markers, this is a consistent theme. Consistent. So to act as if it couldn't happen when it's been happening over millennia, it's just foolish. It's just absolutely foolish. And again, through haplotypes A and B, you see ancient connections, interconnections across the African continent, right? We discussed some of the research of Clyde Winters, who is an FBA scholar. He's an FBA scholar that I disagree with on many things, right? But in his analysis of the Manding and his dating as earlier than, what most other scholars would anticipate, placing it at 3000 BC or the turn of the second millennia BC. This would mean that the Kokoro populations could have possibly, in their migrations across the waters, influenced pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. And if they do have haplotype B, which from the Shomarka study from Mark Lipson, we do observe in ancient West African hunter-gatherers, that would make sense, right? It would definitely make sense. So even though I disagree with the FBA scholar Clyde Winters, right, I have to give him his due in terms of the possibilities that he may be correct with respect to these different things. So again, we have an African-wide, continent-wide, haplotype unity, specifically in the E haplotype. And according to Keita, this cuts across, traditional categories based upon geography, based upon language, the Greenbergian language families, based upon physical traits, because the African diversity is very, very wide. When Diop used black or negged, the Diopian definition of blackness is the full phenotypic diversity of the African continent, from albinos all the way to the darkest Sudanese. So these haplotypes transcend, the different diversities, phenotypic diversities that we may observe on the African continent, from North Africa to Southern Africa, right? And, right, the author Keita, he concludes that Africa's populations form a network or reticulum linked primarily through ancient genealogical relationships carried by the E Haplogroup. This provides a scientific understanding and a scientific basis for the understanding of the deep shared biological heritage of all African people. Right? I encourage you to read this article, to read the new UNESCO papers. The Mediterraneanites have been debunked. We can affirm in the Diopian sense that ancient Kemet was black, that ancient North Africa was black. We can definitively affirm that. They've been debunked. Shout out to a lot of these grifters trying to climb on the, algorithm of the sandbores. They're finished. They're a pathetic joke, right? This is the reality, right? Black unity now and forever, right? Pan African power. That's all I got for y'all, and this hope to catch you on the next one. Peace.
Let's go to comma green, we steady on the rise. Digging truth from ancient scenes, we open blinded eyes. Rhyme sharp like pirates' lines, we break the bondage tight. Kamji speaking revolution, keep the fire burning. Shimpy drums guide our stride, we march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide, our voices thunder loud. Politics and history, we stitch them in every verse. From Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets, we claim the Kamji verse.